Hey there, Kelly here from Bark and Bobble, and today I'm so excited to teach you how to crochet the Juliet Bandana. This is a sweet little design with tiny hearts throughout, as well as a decorative top and bottom border, and worked on the bias from corner to corner, starting down at the bottom and ending at the top. This is very simple to whip up. You can use this as a great stash buster, and it's something you can do in under an hour. And don't be afraid of those mid-row color changes. I'll teach you how to make them super easy, and I think once you've got it down, you're gonna wanna make this in every color you have, so let's dive in. Now for this tutorial, we'll need a couple of supplies, starting with your crochet hook. Because this is not a design that's dependent on gauge, you can do this with a fine weight yarn, a bulky weight yarn. You are going to choose your crochet hook based on what yarn you're using, and you're just looking to get something that's similar to this. It doesn't, again, need to be a specific gauge, but you want it to be pretty tightly woven without a lot of gaps. So I am using Karen cakes, and I have a blossom cake here and a latte cake here. And with that, I'm going to be using a 5mm crochet hook. You can, again, use whatever is going to be comfortable for you. This is not dependent on gauge because we're going to start at the bottom and crochet up. And so you can literally stop at any point or even continue going at any point. If you get really excited, just keep going and make it a blanket. But go ahead and choose what's going to be most comfortable for you and give you a nice tight weave. The last thing you may find nice to have is a stitch marker, and so if you'd like to have that, make sure you have one available. It's not necessary. There's one stitch in every row that can be a little fiddly to find, and so if you want to not have to worry about that, a stitch marker is a great option. Now before we start, let's go ahead and take a look at all of the stitches we're going to be using for this pattern. And we're going to start with very simple, a chain stitch. So if you've never done this before, you're going to hold your yarn and simply pull up a loop through the loop that's on your hook, and that is it. So literally just pull up a loop. Most likely you already know this, so I'm going to scoot through and let's take a look at the next stitch. So next stitch is going to be a single crochet. So you're going to go into the stitch you're working into, pull up a loop, and then pull through two. Very, very simple. Into the stitch you're working on, pull up a loop, pull through two. That is a single crochet. And now let me finish this row, and next we're going to go ahead and take a look at a split single crochet. So to do this, you're going to go into the stitch you're working on. You're going to go ahead and grab your contrasting yarn if it's not already attached, and you're going to hold it so that there's a decently long tail. Go ahead and put that on your hook. And now remember, we're inside the stitch we're working on. You pull that through. And then instead of pulling through the white that we just added, we're just pulling through the original color. And then we would go ahead and do our single crochets again, and I would always weave in these tails. So that's how we attach in the middle. Let's go ahead and turn. We'll do a quick little row of single crochet, weaving in those tails just to get back to the right side of our work because we flipped it around at this point. Okay, so we're back at the other end, chain one. And again, we're gonna weave in the tails of that contrasting color. So start with a single crochet. This time I'll just go ahead and poke into the next one. And now we have these two tails in this case. You're not grabbing the short one. You're gonna grab your working yarn, the longer one, the one that's attached to the ball. Scoop that up, pull that loop up, and using the original color, finish your single crochet. We'll follow that with a standard single crochet, and let's do one more. We poke through, we're going to pull up a loop from our working yarn of the white. This can be tricky to grab, especially when you have two tails. Once the second tail is gone, way easier. So much easier. And then we follow it with, and that's how you end up with your little hearts. So that's our split single crochet, and we'll go over that again as we go through. The next one we're going to be doing is a slip stitch, which you very likely already know. Just poke in, kind of like a chain, you come through and just pull through that original loop, poke, pull up a loop, pull through one. There's no yarning over when you come through. And now the last thing I want to show you is how to do a foundation single crochet working off of an existing single crochet pattern. So what we're going to do is we've chained one. So we did our last single crochet, chain one, go back through the same hole, pull up a loop, and you're going to go ahead and pull through one and then one again. What that does is it creates the top of a single crochet, just like we have here, and it creates the chain that we would normally work into. So let's do that again. So in this case, instead of going back into that original loop, that's where we start. We're going to go into these two bottom loops. So you can see we have our top and we've created these two bottom loops right there. We're going to go through both of those. Okay, pull up a loop and make sure those are pretty even. Pull through one, pull through two. Same thing, we've created two new loops. That's our bottom, that's what would be our chain. And then this is our top of our single crochet. So we go through the two bottom loops, pull up a loop, pull through one, and pull through two. And so you can keep going as long as you want. This is how you do a foundation single crochet off of an existing pattern that you've already created. All right, so we've taken a look at all of the stitches we're going to use and the materials that we need. Let's go ahead and get started working on our bandana. We're starting with the bottom corner and we're starting with the pink. So your color 1 versus the white, which would be your color 2. So first and foremost, I like to start this with a magic ring. I will show you how to start it without a magic ring, but to do a magic ring, start with 2 fingers over the top. You're gonna wrap around and create an X. I like to hold my working yarn between my pinky and my ring finger. Go under just that first loop that you did and pull through a loop of your working yarn. It's gonna wind up twisting, that's fine. And then you're just gonna pull a loop of your working yarn through the loop you just created. So now, when you let go, it should look a little something like this. This tail becomes a little bit twisted here, and I like to just snatch that up, pull it through, and that way it's a little more clean. And then we would begin from here. And to begin from here, we would start with two chains and then 2 single crochets into the loop. So we have a chain 2, 2 single crochets. And at this point, we would tighten our loop. Let's go ahead, if you really are not a fan of the magic ring, I know people have a lot of feelings about that. Let's look at another way to start. So with this, we're gonna make a slip knot and leave yourself a little tail that we can weave in. Put that on your hook and go ahead and chain 1, 2, 3, and now we're going to go in the 3rd loop from our hook and put 2 single crochets, 1 and 2. So you can see this creates the exact same thing. We have our chain 2 space, which can be a little funky to find. So that's where you may like having a stitch marker there so you know where it is. And then we end up with our 2 single crochets. So I'm gonna go ahead and start mine with the magic ring. That's my preferred method. I think it looks really clean, but whatever you prefer will absolutely work. Okay, so we get our magic ring, tighten that up a little bit. And this is where we go ahead and do our chain 2 and our 2 single crochets. So 1 and 2. I'm not going to be using a stitch marker throughout. However, this is where, pull that through, this is where you might like to add a stitch marker. So let me show you where to put that. So we have our single crochet here, we have a single crochet here, and then we have that chain 2 space. And if you kind of wiggle it before we tighten up that loop, it's easy to find. This is where you might like to have a stitch marker, because if you watch, when we tighten up our magic ring by just pulling that loop, this tightens up and it all looks a little jumbled. Having a stitch marker there lets you know when we turn where you're going to be crocheting at the end, because we're going to put 2 single crochets in there. So I won't be using a stitch marker, but just know if you'd like to use one, no shame in that. And the place you're going to put it is at the end of every row or the beginning of every row when we do a chain 2. So with that, the next thing we'll do for row 2 is we will chain 2. Stitch marker goes there. Turn your work if you haven't already. And from here, we're going to go ahead and do a single crochet. And then this is where we're going to do our first split single crochet. So we're going to put our hook into the next stitch, just like as if we were working a normal single crochet, but instead of pulling up a loop of this color, we're going to go ahead and add our secondary color. So this is about the length of the tail that I like. If you like it longer, do you. Go ahead and put that on your loop, just like so. And this is awkward to hold, but it doesn't stay awkward the whole time. So just pull that through, power through the awkward, grab that first color working yarn. It's fine if this is loose for now, we can tighten it up. Just pull through your 2 different colors there. And then this is where you can tighten a little bit. You do want to leave these a little bit loose. If they become too tight, they sort of sink into the original color yarn, and it's just hard to see the definition of the heart. So now from here, we're going to go ahead and put 2 in that chain 2 space, 2 single crochets in the chain 2 space. So 1 and 2. All right, so next up, go ahead and chain 2. We will turn our work, and for our second row or third row, we're going to go ahead and just put a single crochet in each across and 2 single crochet in the chain 2 space. And I am going to scoop up my 2 yarns. This is my working tail and then, or my working yarn, and then my tail. Leave the tail out if you would prefer to weave it at the end. But either way, you do have to carry this yarn. All right, let's go. So we've got a single crochet in the first, single crochet in the second, pull that nice and tight, single crochet above our split single crochet. That stitch can be a little tighter than the rest of them, so just be aware of that as you're going through. And then we'll put a single in our last, and now we've made it to our chain 2 space. Unbelievably awkward to find. Again, that's where your stitch marker might need to go, but I'm going to go ahead and just find it and put in 2 single crochet there. Okay, so now we can go ahead and we're going to do our chain 2, which we'll do at the end of every round or the beginning of every next round. I'm going to flip my work. And so if you're using your yarn, you notice that it's poking, or as you carry your yarn, you notice that it's poking out. You can just give it a little tug to make sure that it is nice and comfortable. Sometimes you can even over tug and then just wiggle to fan it out, and that can help make sure nothing's sticking out, especially if you use a fuzzy yarn like me. All right, so now on to our 1, 2, 3, 4th row. We're gonna start with our chain 2, of course, and then a single crochet in the first. This is how we'll be starting every single row. Chain 2, single crochet in the first, and then our next stitch will be our split single. So we poke through, we grab our contrasting color yarn, and then we pull our yarn 1 all the way through, okay? And then we follow that with 3 single crochets. 1, 2, 3. Now we have our last stitch plus our chain 2 space. Our last stitch is always going to end up being a split single crochet. So we poke through, pull up a loop of our contrasting color, and then pull our first color through that. And then we're going to end with 2 single crochet into the chain 2 space. So 1 and 2. On the rows where you're creating your little hearts, they can sometimes look a little weird like that. They will gain more definition once we do our return pass, because those single crochets are going to pull this up and reveal the top of that stitch. So don't stress if it looks a little funky here. You also may even want to just take some time to practice doing split single crochets. It can absolutely be a little weird to hold, so no shame in that. So go ahead and chain 2, turn our work, and we do our return pass. I'm going to scoop up the yarn that I'm carrying, put a single crochet in the first, make sure that's nice and tight there. And now I'm going to just do a single crochet in every stitch across. And when I get to the end, I'll be doing 2 single crochet into that chain 2 space. So you're probably noticing what our pattern is going to be. There, and number 2. We just want to make sure that looks nice and straight. Go ahead and chain 2. And so, as I said before, the 2 rows that we just did are the 2 rows we'll be repeating. So let's take notice of that in this one. Here's our first row that we repeat. First row, we've got a chain 2, insert and put a single crochet into the first stitch, and then a split single crochet in the second, followed by 3 single crochets. 2, 3, and then again, split single crochet, followed by 3 single crochets. And right now, you may be noticing I'm going much faster with those split single crochets. Now that my little tail is woven in, it's so much easier. So if you can get past the tail not being woven in yet, things will get better. And we're gonna end in our last stitch with a split single crochet, and in our chain 2 space, 2 single crochets. So the first row is always chain 2, single crochet, split single crochet, 3 regular single crochets, and you repeat the split plus 3 regular all the way across. Your last stitch will always be a split single crochet, and your chain 2 space will always be 2 regular crochets, single crochets. So now we go ahead and turn our work. You can chain before or after you turn, it does not matter. So 1 and 2. And now I'm going to go ahead, and this is our second repeat, or the second row we'll be repeating. And this is very, very simple, just single crochets all the way across. This is a good time to adjust your tension. You may notice, just like mine is, it is starting to curve down a little bit. I always find it hard to keep that tension right. It's just something that I have to always be mindful of. And so if you do too, this is a great place to do that. Keep your initial stitches pretty comfortably loose. You can even do 3 single crochet or 3 chains if you need to. And so we're just going to single crochet across, and I'll be mindful, in addition to keeping these looser, I'm going to keep the ones in the center of my work a little tighter. So we just put a single crochet in every stitch across. And again, the stitches above your split single crochets are sometimes tighter. So just be aware of that as you go through, and make sure you don't skip them in case they kind of sink into your fabric you're making. Oop, there it is, just like we were talking about. Last one, and 2 single crochets into our chain 2 space. Okay, and I'm going to chain 2. So that's our repeat. Always, always, always. The first one is chain 2, single crochet, split single, followed by 3 singles, ending with a split single in the last stitch and 2 singles into the chain space, followed by a row that includes your chain 2 space. So chain 2, single crochet in every stitch across, and 2 single crochets in the ending chain 2 space from the previous row. And we're always going to carry our yarn. So let's go ahead and just work through a couple of these together, just to see how this fabric begins to look. So we did our chain 2, single, split single, and now we're on to our 3 singles. Okay, pull some yarn out. We'll do a split single, and we'll just go into our next 3 singles. I find it easiest to keep my contrasting color yarn hanging loose, and I just you know, grab it when I need it. Some people do like to keep it in their hand. I find that a little bit harder to actually weave it in as I go and carry it. So this is how I prefer to do it, but definitely play around and see what's going to be most comfortable for your hand and your body as you're crocheting. Split single in the last stitch and find our fiddly little chain 2 space, keeping those stitches nice and loose as I literally pulled that tight. And then we did 2 singles there, followed by our chain 2. And then the second of our repeat, scoop up that yarn so we can carry it. We did our chain 2 already, so we do a single in the first and then singles all the way across. Again, above these split singles, it can be a little fiddly, a little tighter. So just be aware of that. Make sure you don't skip that stitch. Now, as you go through, again, if you notice that the yarn you were carrying was a little loose, it's poking through where it shouldn't be, you can just adjust at the end of each row. You have to do it at the end of each row though, because if you do it after you've already created these little heart stitches, you'll pull them too tight. So now what we're going to do before we begin adding our tails in, or ties, is we're going to go ahead and do a row of our straight up single crochet and then a row of our single crochet with the splits. And we're going to do that without an increase. Adding that chain 2 space is an increase because it's an additional 2 stitches on top of, or in addition to, that last stitch. So to do those without an increase, we're simply not going to add the 2 chain spaces, and nor will we be working into the chain space we do have, because we are still going to chain 1 and turn our work. So unlike before, we have no chain 2 space, so we're just going directly into, after a chain 1, our first stitch. We're still going to carry our yarn. And so this is the row where we're simply doing 1 single crochet across, very straightforward. You got this. We have our chain 2 space from the previous row. We will work into that, but we won't be creating a chain 2 space to work into from the next one. We're just using up what's already there. Chain 1 and turn. Oh, I had a knot from where I reattached my yarn. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna undo that really quick. Let's see if I can't just hide that. Speaking of fiddling, there we go. You can kind of see it's tucked in the back. I don't care what the back looks like. It's none of my business what happens in the back. The front looks good. Okay, so now chain 1, we've turned our work. And we're gonna go ahead and continue as usual. We do our single crochet. There's no chain 2 space, single crochet, split single crochet, and then 3 singles. 1, 2, 3. And again, by not adding additional chain 2 spaces, we are not increasing. We're not adding any more stitches than are already there. And this is just giving us a little bit of a buffer at the top. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. So now we have our last single crochet to work into, no chain 2 space. And you might notice, so we have our split single and then 1, 2, 3 single crochets. So normally this would be a split single, just like we see down here. But because we don't really want to end on a split single, it's just a little awkward to deal with, and it's not going to make a big difference in the visual of the design. We're going to just do a 4th regular old single crochet there, okay? You're not going to notice it at the end, but it's just going to make your life easier to not have to work with the 2 yarns there. So at this point, we now have, you'll notice, an area that's a little bit flat on either end versus this diagonal that goes right down. This is where our tails are going to be attached so that we have a tie for the bandana. Now to do that, we're going to be using our foundation single crochet. So to start our foundation single crochet, make sure that this stitch is not super tight, and you're going to loosely chain 1. Then insert your hook into the same hole of your stitch that this last stitch was in. So right in, pull up a loop, and now instead of doing a normal single crochet, you have 2 loops on your hook, pull through one of those loops, and then pull through both of those loops. And you'll see it makes it kind of wide. Now what we've done is we've created a single crochet off of nothing. Normally in a single crochet, we have the top loop and we have whatever we're working into. Sometimes it's a chain if it's the very beginning of our project, and sometimes, just like this, it's whatever stitch was below. So we have our top loop and whatever we worked our stitch into. And that's what we have here. We have our top loop, and this would be the equivalent of our chain or maybe our single crochet like we have here that we're working into. And that's an entire single crochet. So what we need to do is the same thing again. But instead of working into that hole right there, we're actually going to work into the bottom of the crochet, single crochet we just made. So flip that over and you'll notice there are 2, 1, 2, a little V shape. Go ahead and insert your hook into both. Pull 1 loop through there, and same thing. Pull through 1 and pull through 2. And we're gonna do that again. So you can flip your work, find your 2 loops, poke through both, pull up a loop, pull through 1, and then pull through 2. As you get comfortable doing this, you probably won't have to flip your work and look at it every time. But if you do, that's fine. You don't have to do very many of these. In my sample here, I did 30 foundation single crochets, and I planned this bandana to fit on my Labradors, who are about 65 pounds. So, you know, not huge, not tiny. For this one, because I'm stopping and creating a smaller bandana, I'm going to go ahead and do half that size. I think that's going to be just fine. You can measure your dog's neck or whatever you're putting this on and use that to decide how big you actually want these ties to be. So I'm gonna go ahead and do 15. So we have our first, second, and third. So let's go ahead and continue. So through the bottom 2, pull up a loop, pull through 1, pull through 2. That's our 4th stitch. Bottom 2, pull up a loop, pull through 1, pull through 2. That's our 5th stitch. So let's just whip through the last 10 here. Okay. We'll double check. This is like one of the only times you're going to count. And, you know, honestly, if you didn't count and they were different sizes, probably wouldn't be that big of a deal. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Amazing. We're done with that for now. We're going to go ahead and cut our yarn. So give that a little snip there. And then I'm just going to pull that through a chain 1, because then I can pull it tight so it's not going to unravel while we do the rest of our work. This might look a little bunchy, it might look a little wobbly. As long as when you look at it, your stitches are pretty even, you're fine. Let's move on to the next part. So we've still got our secondary color attached, just leave that be. We're going to do the same thing, but on this side. However, flip it over, we're going to work from the wrong side of our work. So this is the side without the hearts. Cute, but not quite as cute. Go ahead and grab your yarn that you'll be working with, and you can put a slip knot here if you want to. I live on the edge of danger, I guess, and I very rarely will put a slip knot. Doesn't matter, you can put one or not. What you're going to do is find your last stitch of the previous row and insert your hook under those 2 top loops from the back. Grab either your slip knot or just your loop here, pull that through, and chain 1 with both of these pieces of yarn, your working yarn and your tail. So that right there is going to act as our chain 1, just like we did over here to begin our foundation single crochet. And now our first foundation single crochet goes into the same stitch that that last stitch was in. So if you need to look in the front in order to see that, that's fine. So I can see it's right there, and then the hole is right there. So I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna drop that tail because I don't want to continue working with 2. So I'm gonna pull up just my working yarn, pull through 1. In this case, I happen to have 2 on my hoop, on my hook, because I have this tail there. Treat it as if it's 1, so that we just pull through all of those. And now we're back to normal, we have just 1. So we go back, we find our 2 bottom loops, pull through 1, or pull up a loop, pull through 1, pull through 2, and same exact thing as before. We really are not changing anything here. We're gonna do 15. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's scoot along and get number 5 through 15 done. Okay, that should be 15. We'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. In the last one, we cut and tied off our yarn, but we're not going to do that here. We'll simply do a chain 1 and go ahead and turn your work so that you're facing the front. And we're going to go ahead, we've chained 1, and we're going to do a loose slip stitch all the way across. Something you'll notice is this is stretchy. It can move. So you can imagine if you tie this, over time, it's going to get looser and looser. Adding these slip stitches like we're going to do right now is going to add a little bit more tension to this tie so that it doesn't stretch quite as much. So I'm literally just going through the 2 top loops of my stitch and doing a loose slip stitch. So notice I'm not pulling tight, so this would be tight, right? So we can see the difference. We've got a tight slip stitch versus a loose one. There's no space. This is comfortable. It's still squishy. We're going for the loose one. So just pull through and just keep it loose. If you find that you're having trouble keeping your tension loose, that's okay. And it's not uncommon. Something I like to do when I'm having like a really tight tension kind of day is I hold my hook with my fingertips. Your fingertips are pretty delicate. And because of that, it forces you to be a little bit more delicate with your work versus holding like, you know, this, and you've got a lot of muscle. You're using your arm muscle to pull. Here, we're using strictly our fingertip muscles, and it helps keep that tension much looser. So that's an option to help you go through this if you're finding that your tension's just a little too tight. Okay, so we've made it back to our last 2 stitches before the main body. And here we're gonna go ahead and do a little bit more of a decorative stitch. And this is extremely simple. Go ahead and start by chaining 1 and then slip stitch, chain 1, slip stitch. Once again, keep these pretty loose in tension. That's what's gonna give you this little ruffle definition, which I will pause and show you after this stitch. So you can see when we do that slip stitch plus a chain, it creates like this little zigzag, which looks like such a cute little ruffle. Again, keeping our tension very loose, use your fingertips if it's helpful. Chain and slip. Notice you are not skipping any stitches here. You are simply doing a chain and then immediately going into the next stitch. Nothing is skipped. Okay, chain, slip, chain, slip. Now, let me show you what this looks like if you do it too tight. If we do our chain and tighten it up, and our slip and tighten it up. Chain, tight, slip, tight. You end up with this really tight zigzag. It can look okay, but it's less consistent. I like this more plush, bouncier look. If you're going through and you realize you actually like it better tied up like that, by all means, do it tighter. The main thing is be consistent. Keep your tension consistent throughout. And now we're just going to transition and do only slip stitches. We're not going to do any chains in between. The reason we don't really care about chains in between at this point is because this is the part of the tie that will literally be tied. And there's really no reason to have that decorative ruffle tied up in a knot. And also tying it up in a knot is one, going to make the knot more bulky, which can be awkward. It can also make it come undone more easily if it's too bulky. And also, what's the point? It's just gonna squish that cute little design, so no reason to do that. So now we got to the end. I'm gonna go ahead, I chained one, snip my yarn, leave a nice little tail, because I do have to weave in a couple, and I'll just pull through, because I chained one at the end, we pull through and we tighten that chain. And that gives us this adorable little situation here. You may notice there's still a little bit of bowing. That's okay if there's a tiny bit. One, you can just fiddle with it and stretch it a little, and it fixes it for the most part. If it doesn't fix it though, you can go ahead and block this, and that will generally take care of that. All right, so the last thing we need to do here is go ahead and add our nice little border. So this border that we're gonna add is the same exact thing we just did up top. So you can see it's that chain, slip, starting with the yarn we still have attached up there. It kind of gives it a little, like a cupcake sort of look. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead, we've cut off our pink yarn. We no longer need that for this project. We are on to the white, and that is the end. So I'm gonna just grab my yarn. And from here, we have our first foundation single crochet. We're not gonna work into that, but we are gonna go ahead into that same stitch we already gave some love to before we put our first foundation single in there and our last single of the final row. Pop your hook in, pull up a loop, and look, it's just like you reattached your yarn. You can go ahead and pull through for a slip. We'll chain one. And now our goal here is keep our tension nice and loose. And ideally, we just want one slip stitch per row. I like to try and go through 2 loops here when I can. This is quite a few. I'm gonna go through the whole thing. This doesn't, it's not an exact science. It's just not an exact science. The idea here is we want our tension to be loose enough that this doesn't tighten up and bubble like that. And we want it to be tight enough that it's not creating these giant messy loops on the end. And just try to get yourself one slip stitch. So we did that row per row. We'll go to this one next. It doesn't matter, especially if you're using a fuzzy yarn. Oh my gosh, I just weaved in so much dog hair. It doesn't matter so much exactly what stitch you're going into. These are the ends, and so they're just not that precise. Like, it's not that serious. But we're just doing slip stitch, chain all the way down. I'm gonna pop this through that also just to pull it up. I like to go through 2 strands, you know, 2 loops when I can. Sometimes you may not be able to, no big deal. Okay, we got our last one. I did my chain. Let's do our slip here. And so now we've made it right to the end where our initial first chain or stitch that we worked into, or your magic ring, is. And right here, you're gonna go ahead and chain 1, insert your hook into the magic ring or your chain. You should still have your tail available, so if you need to pull it, you can. If you find that you just can't seem to pull that loose, grab yourself a darning needle, and that's usually skinny enough with the pointed end to push in, and you can kind of wiggle, and that'll give you a loop to work into. So then you're gonna take this, go on in and do a single crochet, chain 1, tighten your loop back up, and then we continue on with our pattern. By doing a single crochet in the end, it just gives us a little, it'll be more obvious in a second, but it just gives us a little bit of a point versus just a rounded edge. So now we're just going to continue up the end, but please leave your magic ring string out. Leave that tail out. That tail is the one that's most likely to come undone in this whole project and like unravel everything. And so that's the one we're going to not weave as we go. We're going to intentionally weave that at the end. But otherwise, just carry on your merry way. Slip stitch, chain, slip stitch, and do this going all the way up. Okay, last one. We did a slip stitch. We're not going to chain, or we are going to chain, but this chain is a little different because we're going to be tying off. So I did my chain. I'm just going to snip and pull through. So there we have it. We've made it to the end. The last thing we need to do here is go ahead and weave in the last few ends that we have. So we have some on the end there, we have these two in the corner, and then we have one right here. So go ahead and grab your darning needle and we'll weave those ends in. Congratulations, you made it through. You learned some new stitches, hopefully. You had a great time, and you ended with a sweet little bandana for your pup or a pup that you love in your life. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here and doing this with me. I would love to hear your feedback and thoughts in the comments, and give me a follow, give me a subscribe. My goal is to continue making more patterns and sharing those tutorials with you as we keep going through the year. Otherwise, have a wonderful day and enjoy your new bandana.